Hi, welcome to the Project Chimps book club, and we have Catherine live in the classroom with the author of the book that we're featuring today. Catherine, tell us about who the author is and what the book is.
Hello, welcome. It's so nice to have everybody here. We are reading a discussion and discussing A Lion-Shaped Mountain by Andrew Halloran, who's joining us here today. Andrew works at Save the Chimps. Would you mind to tell everybody what it is that you do there?
I'm the director of chimpanzee behavior and care. So along with our very talented staff, we have two curators from Save the Chimps here today. We work on making sure we hit our different care goals for our resident chimpanzees, things like to ensure that chimpanzees have things like freedom of choice, to ensure that chimpanzees have a rich social environment, that they have an enriching environment. Because like the chimps at Project Chimps, they all come with kind of their own individualized challenges. And so what we are tasked with in our environment is to assess what the challenges to kind of those care goals are for those chimpanzees, and to create individualized care plans and to enact them. So that's what we do in our department, in addition to all the good stuff, feeding and cleaning and things like that.
Well, very good. I guess we can jump right in. Would you like to give us an introduction, a little bit about the book? It's A Lion-Shaped Mountain, a fable as told through the eyes of wild chimpanzees, which I found absolutely fascinating and delightful. I really enjoyed the book.
Well, great. First of all, thank you for everyone. Thanks Catherine, thanks Project Chimps and everyone for having me here. It's great that people have read the book. You join an elite and very small group of people that have. But it's the book it's kind of the hidden agenda is that it's a philosophy book disguised as a chimpanzee book. And that's why there's things like poems and folk tales and things like that in there. But I think the overriding theme, that the reason I wanted to write it was that there are things that we are told about the world around us, and I think the microcosm of that is chimpanzees. The world doesn't know a whole lot about chimpanzees in actuality. Most of what we know comes from just a handful of wild sites or chimps in captivity. And so people that see chimpanzees, especially if you're working with chimpanzees, if you're volunteering here, you're working on stuff, you're probably seeing things that don't align with what you're seeing in a textbook. And so what I really wanted to kind of put out in the book is not to believe everything that you're told, whether it's about chimpanzees or anything. And that's kind of the metaphor of what the Lion-Shaped Mountain is. So chimpanzees in Sierra Leone has the highest density of chimpanzees of anywhere in the world, of wild chimpanzees. And the entire country is named after something that doesn't really exist. It's supposed to be a lion-shaped mountain. That's what Sierra Leone means. And the only way you will ever see a lion-shaped mountain if you go to Sierra Leone is if someone tells you that mountain is shaped like a lion. Otherwise, it doesn't look like a lion at all. But once you get it into your head, that's all you can see. And that's kind of the metaphor of the book, is that, when you are kind of told this is what chimpanzees are. Chimpanzees are little almost humans. Chimpanzees are these aggressive species that represent this earlier form of warfare and human things like that. Once you see those things, once you hear those things, that's what you see. And I think that beyond chimpanzees being little almost humans or little earlier forms of human evolution, what we see is a really fascinating species, who are fascinating in their own right, with really unique things about them, unique needs, unique challenges. And one of the things that we do share with chimpanzees, that I think is the most profound, is our need for socialization, our need for our social group, our parents, our friends. And when that gets separated, whether you are a human or a chimpanzee, disastrous things happen. And that's kind of the point that I try to make in the book, that socialization and that is the main thing that we share with chimps, more than can chimps do fractions, or can chimps do sign language, or things like that. That need for each other and that need to get through the challenges we face in life is something that humans and chimpanzees share. All of us have gone through, in some part of our life, we've gone through a personal tragedy. And that personal tragedy is something that a chimpanzee could probably go through as well. And that's where I try to, that's where I think that the two species really meet as incredibly social species that we are. And so that's what the book is essentially about. It's about abandonment and what the reality is and what that does to a chimpanzee. Because I think that's an important thing for people to know, particularly people that work with chimpanzees and work for the welfare of chimpanzees. That's such an important need for them.
Very good. Now, I've asked everybody to bring a question with them today, which please feel free if people would like to jump in, raise your hand or whatever, but until that time, I'm just going to go ahead and throw out some discussion questions that, either have been emailed to me or that I have thought of myself. One of the things that, the very first thing I'd like to mention is that we've had this book club now, this is our 5th selection, so we've been doing this for just over a year, and all of the books have the same sort of conservation message in that everything that we do has a ripple effect to the world around us and the community around us and so forth. For whatever reason, maybe I'm just this thick-headed and it took me this long, but your book perfectly illustrated to me how even just the smallest choices that we make throughout our everyday has a ripple effect on our community. You mentioned in the book where, the native inhabitants of the area would plant fruit trees that then attract the chimpanzees because, of course, all they're looking for is food. They're not trying to be pests. And then it just creates this ripple effect. Or, burning the area for crops to be grown by the inhabitants there, and how that can get out of hand and cause a ripple effect. So I don't know why it is that your book spoke so much to me, but the conservation really spoke out to me. I don't know about anybody else as well. What was your main goal for the takeaway that you wanted readers to have?
What I was trying to show in the book is exactly what your very astute observations were, is that every action has a consequence, and those consequences can affect individuals, whether those individuals are chimpanzees or humans or everything else. And so something as strange and random as two villages having this big dispute 100 years ago, where one village gets kicked off and the chief says, this land is cursed, you can't use it anymore, becomes something that becomes basically a safe place for a group of chimpanzees to live 100 years later. And all the actions that happen because there are chimpanzees and there are a ripple effect from that. Everything from the fact that those chimpanzees then go into the current village, steal fruit, and then take that fruit, bring it into the forest, and at the very end of the book, the fruit that they took is now growing more mango trees. That everything has an effect, and sometimes those effects can be positive, oftentimes those effects can be negative, and because what we do has so many consequences, and that's kind of the reality to me of the world, is that we all have these, everything that we do has this giant ripple, and that can be a very stressful realization because anything you do can create this horrible circumstance. And the book is really centered on the fact that this little chimp is separated from his mother due to a fire started by a village that gets out of hand because they're doing their agriculture, and that they had to burn because the population effects have gone so, there's so much human population there now that it causes this fire. And you think, oh, well, forest fire and animals will get displaced and everything like that. What you might not think about is you might have a chimp mother separated from a juvenile chimp and all the consequences there that get ensued from there. there. So yeah, that was a big part.
Were the chimp characters based on chimps that you know?
Yes, everything is based on actual chimps that, so the Tonkalili Chimpanzee Project, which this is all based on, there's two communities in the Tonkalili site, and they're the ones in the book. There's the Matampa group, and they're all named after Charles Dickens characters, and then the Maburi group, and they're all named after Shakespearean characters, and that's how you can tell who's in what group. So there was a fire. Mrs. Joe ends up in the Maburi group, and little Pip is all of a sudden just hanging out with the alpha male at that point, and then she comes back.
So this is really kind of a true story.
I mean, I hesitate to call it a true story
Artistic
because there's a lot of artistic license in
That's
there.
okay,
So
no.
everything there, so what's the nonfiction parts is that there's camera trap things that happen, and I use those camera trap things to piece together a story
Okay.
based on that and based on community reports and based on things that I witnessed.
And Casey?
Casey is a mythic chimp that apparently exists that I had never seen before, and he's never been on a camera trap, but all the locals say that he exists. Yeah.
And he's white.
He's an all-white
Oh.
chimpanzee,
Yeah.
which, I mean, it happens.
Sure.
Takugama had an albino chimpanzee that was taken to them. He didn't survive, but this was probably 12 years ago of an all-white chimpanzee there. So yeah, Casey is kind of stands as, I use him kind of as a symbol of everything we don't know, but that's real and is affecting things that kind of the unknown thing that's affecting everything that.
So when I did ask the group to send me questions ahead of time, that was a very common one, and one that I had as well was this based on an actual chimpanzee or
Yes.
figure? And is there some sort of like message, like a higher being type of message? Does he represent some sort of a higher being that you just have to have faith that exists?
I think rather than higher being, what I think Casey represents to me is that there are random elements out there that we don't know about that are affecting our reality. And whereas Casey is affecting the chimps in real time right now and affecting the humans in real time, to the point where in the book, and this is completely fictional, that Casey's the chimp that they're chasing when the hunter ends up killing Magwitch and Richard. That's what that was meant to represent. But Casey's just as real as the people planting elephant grass 100 years ago, which create the entire ecosystem that's happening now. There's all these random things that we don't see that is creating your current reality. And whether that's a higher power, whether that is a ghost chimp in the forest, whether that's whatever, there are things that we don't know that are currently affecting our reality. And what we tend to do as a culture, as a species, is we create something to explain it, which lion-shaped mountain or chimps doing math or whatever you want to say.
Oh, that was actually my next question, which great, okay. There's a moment in the book where a child questions the way things had always been done, the crossing of the river and not being able to cross back. Was this based on a real person or a real story, or did you choose a child on purpose to question what the adults are telling?
Yeah, to me, that folktale is the meaning of the entire book, and which is why it's at the end there. And that is, I did choose a child because that's kind of who gets thrown into this world where there's all these random elements and all these kind of, this is what you are, this is what you believe, this is what you should do, type of things. And that's kind of the philosophical part of the book. The part where he's being taken up the mountain, if you look at the back cover of the book, that's actually a William Blake painting. And that's what I wrote the story based on, is that painting.
Nice. Just so that the group is aware of how I have this organized in my head, I thought that we would talk about questions on the actual story. of the book, and then we can switch into some of the questions about like real life things happening in Sierra Leone and so forth. So if you have, I have one more book-centric question. So if you have a book-centric question, please be ready to, or story-centric question, please be ready to ask that here in just a minute. But one thing that I noticed, and it could just be me, because I have a terrible time with this. We've been encouraged, of course, to not anthropomorphize the chimps. I have such a hard time doing that, because when I look at the chimps and I watch them, they appear so human to me. So it's very difficult for me. In the book, I felt like there were many times where there were human types of experiences projected onto the chimps. Much of the time for the story. There's a fire, a human child is afraid, the mother throws the kid on their back to go to safety. Well, sure enough, there's a fire, the chimpanzees are afraid, the mother chimpanzee grabs the baby chimp on her back and gets them to safety. So do you feel that you anthropomorphized a little bit more so in the book to create a point, or do you also try very hard to not anthropomorphize the chimps?
So to answer the first question first is, yeah, that was very deliberate on the fact that what I wanted to show is where is that peak of the mountain where humans and chimpanzees really meet, and child afraid, mother takes care, socialization, abandonment, things like that is where you'll see that anthropomorphism come out. Broadly speaking, anthropomorphism has been so incredibly destructive to chimpanzees throughout the course of human-chimpanzee interactions. It's the reason you had chimpanzees in movies. It's the reason there were chimp tea parties at zoos. It's the reason there were chimps in circuses. It's the reason for chimps in biomedical research. It's that similarity that chimps have been cursed with throughout their history. I mean, the worst thing to happen to chimps is to be so much like humans, because it is what has been responsible for so much bad welfare for chimpanzees. So what I'm trying to do with the book is the thing that I anthropomorphize, which is not that this is the end all be all, but is that social connection, the things that they need. So what you won't see in the book are chimpanzees doing sign language or doing human things or doing the things or having tea parties or playing with balls or the things that, like big circus balls, I'm not saying like enrichment, stuff like that. Things like that is what you wouldn't see in the book, but what you will see is that deep connection of child's need for mom, child's need for social learning, child's need for protection from the elements, fear of what's unknown, that's out there, fear of separation, fear of the natural elements, the things that we can identify with as humans, in my mind, are the same things that chimpanzees go through just in the course of living their lives.
Very good. Does anybody have a question about the story or the book that they would like to ask at this time? Okay, no problem.
I've got a couple of.
Okay, please.
Sorry, I found myself reading that book, oh man, I want to get Xanax. I'm telling you, I don't even know what Xanax is, but I wanted it. I just got so angry. There was like a whole bunch of emotions. There was anger, there was despair, frustration, helplessness. Thank goodness Pip found Mom, because otherwise I would have been a Bambi all over again, you know? But if you could take, and this is kind of tying all in, because you just feel so helpless when you can see so much destruction and that butterfly effect, how much it does, and maybe not this straw, or maybe this straw, not using it might help the environment. That was Thursday morning, don't. I've often thought, like with Blue Origin and all those things, if you can take some politicians, because it's always, I hate to say, well, it seems like the evil are always at the top, pulling the strings, being the marionette masters. Sometimes in chimps, not always, but it seems like the alpha in the chimps has more compassion than a lot of our political people. And that I'm talking worldwide. If you could take someone in Blue Origin, those politicians, and let them see how thin the atmosphere is, okay, and how small the world is, that would help. If you could take those people to Sierra Leone, what would you hope to convey, other than getting James Cameron to do a movie?
Well, and I'm not even sure I would want James Cameron to do a movie about it. I would, what I would hope to show is that the things that are plaguing Sierra Leone, which are ultimately plaguing wild chimps across Africa, aren't things that are caused by the people locally have been living alongside chimpanzees in West and Central Africa for 10,000 years and doing the same kind of agriculture and things like that.
And no problem.
Right. What's different is all the global interests which continue to take from Africa in particular, because the cheapest land on this earth are lands that great apes live on, whether that's orangutans or chimpanzees or gorillas. So when you fill your car up and it says 10% ethanol, that's biofuel, and we're trained to think that that's coming from some pleasant cornfield in Kansas. It's coming from a sugarcane field in West Africa, which is depleted habitat, which has kicked villages off their area, and which has squeezed humans into chimpanzees into these tiny fragments to where they're interacting every day. And so, and we're trained and taught, oh, this is a good thing because it's not oil. And so we're actually being environmentally conscious by using ethanol. It's kind of like how, remember in like the 80s, it was all like, natural gas is where you want to go because that's the environmental thing. And then the other stuff, after you get it. And so it's the very similar type of thing that, so I had a big, powerful person go there that I think that kind of the idea is that this is what the consequence of kind of our global interests have and who it's affecting. And now, does that supersede the greed that's on there? Probably not. But that's what I would show. To your first point, which is an interesting point, politicians and the difference or the contrast between politicians and like alpha chimps. I don't think that the parallel isn't there because politicians are these elected, Joe Biden exists to me as a collection of molecules on my screen. I've never actually seen him. He has no connection to me and all of that. He's an elected official that basically, to me, represent kind of like the election of that are kind of representative of kind of the area of humanity that elected them. And I think an alpha chimp is like your grandfather, your dad, your neighborhood, because you know them and they're so connected. If I was separated from my child, Joe Biden wouldn't take care of him through the forest. But an alpha chimp would. So that's where I would manifest that.
Okay. Let's see here. I had pages and pages. Sorry. There was one thing on page 100 where you said true evil is a lion-shaped mountain. I didn't quite grasp that.
I did that strongly worded statement, which and I never know what minds that I'm in when I write these things, but is a reference to the lion-shaped mountain represents that you are what you are told. And you can be what you are told. And you can affect change in this way because you are told this. And that mountain over there is shaped like a lion. And chimpanzees are this way. And so that's what I'm saying is what is true evil is that. And then probably had a few chimps before I wrote that line, so.
All right, I needed one. I noticed in there that it was noted that the chimps were actually observed using tools in the 1700s. And love you, Jane Goodall and Jolene Goodall. But then I thought that was where she came in, you know.
It was known before that chimps were used, she made it very public. I think,
Okay,
you know,
that was right.
yeah, I think, there's actually this great work by a culture anthropologist named Jean Sept, who has all these documentation of these missionaries going to Sierra Leone and their accounts of the chimps there. Now she's, Jane Goodall, what Jane Goodall did and really where her power to me really is the greatest, is that before Jane Goodall saw that, the chimp research was, how much are chimps like humans? What can we do to make chimps more like humans? What can we do? Jane Goodall's research was the first time the mass public was watching chimpanzees be chimps and watching all these amazing things that are going on in the wild without people training them to do these things. And I think that's kind of the big thing. And I should clarify, no one had seen them do termite fishing before that. That she was the first person to see that, and to actually have like Hugo Van Lauwet's film where the chimps are actually out competing the baboons by using fishing poles, just because of culture and social learning is something that is incredible.
So what do you think people could learn from chimps?
Well, in regard to, I mean,
Getting okay, they're fine in their bubble, in Sierra Little bubble. They do fine with their fission fusion, that they can survive. What about the world in its state today? I know it's kind of a big, that's what this book gets me so going. I tell you. My mind just started racing. Well, what can we do? How can we fix that?
I mean, I think, you know, to me, what chimps can show humans is ultimately what is important are your social bonds and your ability to keep those bonds. And to me, that is the thing that chimp. Now, as far as how chimp socialization and chimpanzee politics go, not to go against what like Franz de Waal says, but chimpanzee politics are uniquely chimpanzee politics.
Okay.
If humans had politics like chimpanzees, it would be very, very messy.
I saw my exit somewhere.
But chimpanzee politics function as chimpanzee politics. Human culture functions as human culture, and the way society is run. However, what I think gets lost in our massively global, society, where it's everything is global, everything is so large, everything is impersonal. Everything is social media, everything is email, you don't even talk on the phone, it's texting and things like that. What I think gets lost is those social connections, and I think it makes us distant from everything from, you know, what is this action doing to a species that I've only seen in a zoo, to just the importance of those bonds that we have.
Excellent book.
Well, thank you.
Man, wow.
I feel the same way, Janice.
Holy cow.
Tracy, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I don't really have a question as much as a comment on, you mentioned, I really enjoy the way that you mentioned at different points how conservation is such a nuanced concept. It's not just about the wildlife or environment, it's social, it's cultural, it's economic, and the way that local people have to adapt, like you said, the global interests, the relationships that they have with the landscape and ecosystems around them, and how that has had to change and the impact that has on both them and the wildlife because of these global interests, the population coming up, the excavation of their natural resources and so on. And I just appreciate, because I feel like you don't see that a lot in conservation like discussions, as much as it's important to focus on wildlife and the environment. Sometimes the local people definitely get a bad rap about things for the way that they've had to adapt to what's happening, so.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because all too often, especially in Africa, the villains of the story are the local poachers or things like that. Not the people supporting the local poachers. The poachers are generally impoverished people that are looking to make ends meet. The people killing chimpanzees because they're raiding their crops aren't these big factory farmers wanting to make another buck. They're literally trying to feed themselves and their family. And so all too often they're made out to be the villains of the story, when in fact the villains probably don't live there. The villains probably live thousands and thousands of miles away and are supporting this system which is creating this. There is no Sierra Leonean that owns a biofuel plantation in Sierra Leone. There's Norwegians, there's Sri Lankans, there are Chinese, no Americans as of yet. Sierra Leoneans aren't making a whole bunch of money mineral mining. People in other countries are doing that. They're the ones that are employing people to do that. So I think your observation is very astute. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that conservation needs, conservationists shouldn't just be biologists, shouldn't just be ecologists. They should be cultural anthropologists. They should be sociologists. They should be all of those things to understand, because the humans are also part of that ecosystem, and it's really important to factor that in. I think a long time ago, we found, especially in places like Africa, you can't just put a fence around a forest and say, this is a national park, you can't hunt here. Because all that means is that no one owns that area, and so it's just susceptible to being bribed away. If you go to there's a protected area in Sierra Leone that there was supposed to be a bunch of chimps. When I first went there, I went there to see, and it was an area called Kambui Hills. And it looks like hell, literally. It's a wasteland of decapitated trees and fires and things like that when you go on there, which is supposed to be, this great lush jungle that's protected. And it's like that way because they didn't take any people into consideration when they set this up. They basically put a fence around it and said, this is protected area. You can go in and go to the warden there, and you can pay him a sum of money, and you can go take trees, you can take chips, you can take money, or you can go there for conservation. It doesn't matter to him. He'll take your money and do whatever you want. And so that's why I think conservation has to involve local communities. Community-based conservation, there shouldn't be a binary there. All conservation should be community-based conservation.
Excellent. Tracy, I was going to ask your question next unless you would like to ask it. Okay. So we would like to know about the process you went through in writing the book, how you organized the story and got it on paper.
So the logistical publishing part of it, I wrote a book, it's been 10 years now ago, called Song of the Eighth, and that was on St. Martin's Press, and they were going to publish the second one. And so I actually pitched this a long time ago, and they looked at it and said, no way. It was too weird, too depressing. They wanted Little Mama on my skates and handed it right back. So I basically put it in a drawer for a long time. And then finally, I've been working with a great publication called Earth Island Journal, which if you're a good publication, just with the Earth Island Institute, which is a great conservation organization, and they publish a journal. They agreed to publish this as a serial. So this was actually serialized in Earth Island Journal, about half of it, not the whole thing, was serialized, and so then took that and then published it from there. And that's the way it actually got out. Because St. Martin, there was no way St. Martin's or anything else was going to publish this. The process to write it happened because I had originally wanted to write a much more sciencey book about conservation in Sierra Leone. But I'm not a great scientist, and so I thought that this is a much more compelling way to share my thoughts on it. So that's why I wrote it this way.
I think it was a really important way to tell the story instead of being sciencey, because we've read, lots of books now, and like I said, it never really clicked to me. I needed this story, this fable, to be able to make all of the connections
Thank you.
for myself. So I'm sure that I'm not the only one, that there are other people that are the same. Anybody else question about the story as a whole? Okay. Other than educating whenever possible, what are the types of things that we can do from here to help wild populations of chimps in Sierra Leone?
I think the first and foremost thing is to understand those ripple effects and understand with how what you consume can have that ripple effect onto conservation, onto wildlife, whether that is purchasing minerals that were obtained in Africa, which something that didn't go into Lion-Shaped Mountain, but is just as destructive there is the mineral pollution of the rivers there, which affects chimps and humans in the same way. Humans especially, because they're actually the main source of protein there is actually not what they're hunting in the forest, it's what they're fishing out of the Pompano River. And the Pompano River is completely polluted because of the one end of the Pompano River. They do all sorts of gold mining and mineral mining. And when I first came to Sierra Leone, the Pompano River was blue. It's now a muddy brown, and people are pulling catfish out of there and eating it that are feeding off the bottom, and they're getting mercury poisoning, and it's not going diagnosed because they don't have healthcare there and things like that. And again, there isn't some wealthy fat cat Sierra Leonean making that money. That's someone in Belgium, so that's where to look at how those ripple effects happen. Who's buying the minerals that are eventually being bought from the guy in Belgium who actually took it from a Sierra Leonean, and things like that. Whether it's that or ethanol or things like that. That to look at how what you consume can affect that. And I think also, and I think that you all probably do this, just judging by where you work and what your interests are, is spreading the word that chimpanzees are a unique species with very specific needs, and that when their habitat is gone, they don't get those needs. And that's true in the wild. And also they have specific needs in captivity, and these are things that that can be spread by people that know better, that by people that see this and work with them, so that other people won't support a chimp living alone in a roadside zoo, and other people won't support something that's destructive to habitat in Africa and things like that. I think that understanding that chimpanzees are a species that are important, that they're the closest related species to us, and it's a great window into what affects us. But they have these specific needs, and I think that as a kind of community of people interested in chimpanzee welfare, that's something we can all spread, as I'm sure you guys all do anyway. But that's, I think, something that's important.
Sarah, I'm going to ask your question unless you would like to. Okay. She is wondering if the government of Sierra Leone has supported the preservation of their chimp population. Do tourists come there to see the chimps as they do in Uganda?
There's not a lot of tourism in Sierra Leone. However, the government of Sierra Leone is, though not perfect, they did make chimpanzees the national animal of Sierra Leone, which is huge. That was. They've also upped the penalty for killing a chimpanzee to the point where it's a scary penalty for people that do it. Before, you could actually make more selling a dead chimpanzee than was the fine. So, and that's changed now. The government has also completely supported the Takugama Chimpanzee Sanctuary, so that is good. Now, at the same time, the government has taken money from the Chinese government and said, okay, you can have this land over here, or taken money from the Sunbird Biofuel company out of Sri Lanka and said, okay, you can have this. And so it's both. There's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of good things that they're doing. They're certainly doing better things than what Guinea is doing. But it's, it gets balanced with a lot of bad things too. And those bad things, unfortunately, are overpowering the good things.
Are there volunteer opportunities there?
There's volunteer opportunities at Takugama, the sanctuary there, and that's just a matter of emailing them, and they'll set you right up. It costs, it's pretty inexpensive, it does cost, but I think you get like, I shouldn't even.
We will look at it.
Yes, yeah, I forget exactly what you get, but
Okay.
yes.
So Takugama, which we are going, just letting you all know that we're going in February. No, I don't know. Hopefully, we'll see. I just invented that today, but I still want to. And then also, sometimes I am afraid to say things because it just makes me sound so dumb, especially in the group of people that I'm currently with. It feels dumb, but anyway, we would like to hear everything about Tonkalili Chimpanzee Project.
So there's a lot. But basically, Tonkalili Chimpanzee Project, which you can go to www.tonkalilichimpanzeeproject.com.
We will.
It's okay. The main focus is to mitigate conflicts between humans and wild chimpanzee populations. It's a small group. It's the chimps you know from the book. So that this isn't, this super strategic conservation area, but what it is that if we can make community conservation work in this area, then the idea is to share what works and what doesn't work with other conservation groups, and also kind of spread community conservation as something that should spring up in a lot of places, but all kind of have the same direction and same goal of doing that. One of the things with community-based conservation is if you're not committed to being there for the long haul, you can actually make things a whole lot worse. So this year, Deanna and Ivana were there, and we saw chimps, and the chimps kind of hung out with a baby there, and that's usually we see them and they flee right off. So most of our stuff just comes from camera traps. The fact that they're doing that is a big reason why we could never leave there, because that also makes them super vulnerable. We've never done anything to try and habituate them. We want them not to be habituated, but even now they're comfortable. They haven't been, except for Richard Magwitch, who actually got killed by hunters in 2014. There hasn't been any other chimp killing that we know about since the inception of the project. So that creates this secure area, which is great, but were we to leave, that area wouldn't not that we're these primatology saviors, but if the community conservation thing were to stop, those chimps would be vulnerable to getting killed again, and they would be much more sitting ducks. So that's the other kind of message with the Tonkalili Chimpanzee Project is trying to spread that. You might be a grad student that wants to go do conservation, so you're going to go to a 2-year conservation project in Sierra Leone. You can actually make things a lot worse with that. But we would like to see, in an informed way, other community-based conservation initiatives spring up, and that's the idea behind the Tonkalili project.
Do you take volunteers for that project as well?
We don't, just because we're so small and it's kind of dangerous out there, and it's we don't have like volunteer housing or anything. We're literally in tents in an area that has a lot of cobras and mambas and things, and it's but that's not to say in the future that wouldn't happen, but generally just from it's kind of me and my partner in all this is Dr. Tina Cloutier-Barber, and we'll take people. So like we've taken people from Save the Chimps and taken people, some partners and colleagues and things like that. But we haven't had a volunteer program as of yet, but that's something that could definitely happen in the future.
Okay. Are you seeing positive change?
And so yeah, this is where I kind of feel like a downer. Yes, but I'm well aware what the situation could look like 15 years from now. And I just think, we could be doing all of this, and if someone offers the 7 villages that are involved the right amount of money, that area could turn into a biofuel plantation. And so I'm seeing positive change right now. I tend to be a kind of a pessimistic guy, so I worry about what 15 years down the road looks like. And, but I don't think that, to bring it back to Charles Dickens and all the names in the book, Scrooge can change the future, but, the events don't have to be the way that they are. And so those things can change should the course of events change, and it's up to us to change those course of events to increase the knowledge to make sure something like that doesn't happen. But right now, deforestation is not going to go the other way. It's going to continue. It's continued unabated over the last, it's not slowing down. There's deforestation happening right now as we're talking in places where chimpanzees live, in places where human villages are, and places that all sorts of things that we care about are. There's deforestation going on there in the name of having cheaper gas. So there's deforestation and pollution going on so that people can have tools. There's for silly things, there's deforestation in Indonesia so that we can have healthier Oreos. It's for silly reasons. And so that hasn't stopped. And so that's where things need to.
I know I personally get very overwhelmed with everything that is going on in the world, and conservation issues and all the little impacts that we have, like our waste on a daily basis. What would you say, what's like the best advice you could give people like us to do between like education or contacting our politicians?
Education and spreading the word. I think, again, as a pessimist, I don't think anything good happens at the political level. I think educating people on the ground, this is what, we have the power, we're the actual people that are doing this, and I think educating the mass public, and it's happened before. The world was educated on the plight of marine mammals in the 80s, and that changed things. Didn't completely solve things, but marine mammals started doing better because of that. And I think people are getting educated about the plight of, and it's not just straight apes and that, but all African wildlife in these areas. So that very important strip, between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, that is just the area that we just decimate as a human society. That people are getting educated about that more and more, and that so I think spreading the word, in particular, people that work for chimpanzee welfare, I kind of think it's our responsibility to talk about these things. Even we're at dinner with people that don't share our interest or anything. Be the annoying person that keeps talking about chimpanzees, and it might affect something. Yeah. No, and I think that's important. I think it's important because your Uncle Fred might not care about chimpanzees, but he might say, "Oh my God, I had this annoying conversation with him," and then someone that does care about that. So.
I was recently called unhinged for making commentary on how it's not okay to joke about primate ownership, and they were like, "Just read the room, dude." And I was like, "No, it's important.
It is important.
It is very important.
Yeah, we need to not joke about this."
Yeah, no, it's very important. And very important to spread that message. I mean, I think that, and it just takes, one voice to start that chain of command, chain of events that can affect things. I mean, I think one person can affect a lot of change. Alana doesn't think so, but we have to debate about this. One person can actually affect that change.
Are we doing it with our children? I mean, that's where we need to start, because they're the ones who are going to take over after us. And just like recycling is a way of life and it's taught in a younger age at school, has anybody looked into expanding conservation education with anyone young?
I think there's a lot of places doing some great conservation education work. I mean, things as big as like Disney, things like that are doing some really good conservation things. I think, when we see, when you see a documentary about chimpanzees and watching chimpanzees act like chimpanzees and not chimpanzees, again, I know I was pick on chimpanzee and sign language, but instead of seeing chimps trying to act like humans, actually watching chimpanzees interacting with their environment. The more children see things like that, it's great. However, my kind of pessimistic view on that is that children are so influenced by social media, so influenced by what's on their screen, so influenced by what's on their phone, and I think they get a very self-serving message with that. So hopefully there are things that can counteract kind of the lure of, what they're seeing on TikTok, or the lure, or if the stuff on TikTok can become a positive message, things like that they'll watch. So that's my opinion on it.
I have to brag on our event coordinator for a moment, just because we had such a great experience with a field trip. Our event coordinator is Megan Hume. She's on the computer and not with us in person, but she had a group of high school students that came, and our tour guides taught them what a chimpanzee fear grimace is, and how many times humans who don't know think that the fear grimace looks like a smile. Well, sure enough, if in their school they didn't have some of those images on posters around the school, after visiting here, the students went back, told the administration about what that image actually means, and they had all of the posters removed in the school. So
that's so great. I mean, I've been to AZA accredited zoos where on the brochure is a chimp doing a fear grimace. And those are people that know better, but it's and so that's where the education, the people that know better need to not spread that.
Exactly.
This is a chimp that's terrified.
yeah,
This isn't a chimp making a joke.
yeah,
This is a chimp that has a very species-specific communication tool, and they're telling you that something is wrong, and you're using that as a chimp trying to be a little homeless, and it's, that's where it gets, so I'm glad they did that.
well, very good. Andrew, we have so enjoyed having you here. We've enjoyed having anybody here online joining us as well. Very good.
I popped in for a little bit.
Yeah, I'm now seeing, I haven't been monitoring the questions. Hopefully our remote people are doing that. But do you have any closing remarks that you would like to make before we remove ourselves from online and get to the book signing and visiting portion?
Just thanks for those of you that read, thanks for reading, and if you didn't read, thanks for your interest in it, and it's really great that the book is the positive things that you said about it, that makes me very happy, so thank you.
Very good. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much. Hope everybody has a great day. And Holly, do you have any closing remarks?
No, but we didn't have any questions from online people. We had one comment, though, and I'll read it. When the human race goes extinct, it will benefit everything on the planet. That's a very pessimistic comment, like Andrew might think about, too.
I agree. And then also, I had just along the lines of your conservation and how we have a ripple effect. I have a quote from, of course, Jane Goodall that says, "You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make." So I think that encompasses the book. And with that, we will say farewell. And thank you all very much for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.